Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everyone and happy Juneteenth. Today is Freedom Day. I hope everyone is out having a good time, feeling excited about today because we have a wonderful, wonderful presentation for you today. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Christy Perry. I'm here, the director of United Excel Social Justice Institute, housed at United Christian Faith Ministries. And on behalf of our pastor and founder, Mark Ellis, and our First Lady, I want to just give you a great big welcome and a happy Freedom's Day. Today we have a great co-founder, Ms. Kathe Hambrick with us, co-founder and curator of the River Road African American Museum. She is going to walk us through the journey of from slavery to freedom. So she's with us tonight and she's going to do that. And I just want to let everybody know and to remind everyone that if you want us to share more topics, don't forget to text that number, got more, 225 250-1970. Again, text got more to 225-250-1970. And United Excel will try to work with you and host those topics. I also want to talk about one other thing that United Excel is working with. We have our Louisiana Faith Alliance. We have a petition. We are trying to bring about police reform in the state of Louisiana. We need your support. So I need all of you to go join the Louisiana Change. Text 225-250-1970. Text LA Change to 225-250-1970. You can join our alliance as well as sign our petition. Please don't just stop there. Share, share, share. We are working to bring about change in our community, in the state, and across the country. So tonight, again, we have with us Ms. Kathe Hambrick. She's the co-founder and curator for the River Road African American Museum. And we also have Monica Jean-Pierre, who's going to be moderating for us tonight.
Monica? Thank you so much, Dr. Perry. I'm so excited to hear.
Okay.
We're going to jump right on in. My first question for you is, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about the African American Museum and why is it so important for those of us that may not know, why do we celebrate Juneteenth and why is it so important?
Well, first of all, giving honor to God. I want to say thank you for inviting me to be a part of this program. But before we get started, in honor and recognition to my good friend, who you all know and may also have been a friend of yours, in honor of Miss Sadie Joseph Roberts, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence.
We'll have our moment of silence now. And Ms. Hambrick, we thank you for acknowledging her. We really do.
Yes. Miss Sadie was a very good friend, very, very good friend and colleague of mine. And many of you may know that Sadie fought tirelessly, not just in Baton Rouge, but throughout the country to try to get Juneteenth as a national holiday. Mm-hmm. And as she would put together her festival there in Baton Rouge, we would work with the community in Donaldsonville through the River Road African American Museum to put together a Juneteenth Freedom Festival in Donaldsonville. So I want to say in regards to Juneteenth, 26 years ago when I started the museum in March of 1994, there was no internet. So now we have at our disposal just about anything that you want to know about Black history or anything that you want to know about a particular subject. You can go online and do research. But as those of us who are scholars, what we know and what we need to get young people to understand is that you can't just Google something, and you can't just stay on Instagram and Facebook and expect that you will learn the truth about any given subject, much less subjects related to our history, Black history. So I want to encourage parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles to continue a tradition which Sadie was definitely dedicated to, building libraries in our homes. You know, I know some of you who are here with us tonight may have your own libraries. Maybe you saved your books from college, your college studies at universities or high schools. But it's very, very important to build a library so that your children can learn how to do research and understand the importance of knowing who they are, not just whose they are, but who they are, because we are a great people. And that's what I've learned in the years of doing research and celebrating freedom on Juneteenth, June 19th.
Thank you. I noticed that your the African American Museum is one of 26 sites on the Louisiana African Heritage Trail. So I just want to know, was there significant in Donald?
You were breaking up. Can you maybe ask again? I can't hear you.
Oh, okay, Ms. Hambrick, I'll pick up from here.
Yeah.
Monica was talking about Donaldsonville and you starting the museum, being co-founder of the museum in Donaldsonville. And she wants to know, was there any significant reason that you picked that particular location as a site for your museum?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background. I started the museum 26 years ago, March of 1994, because there was no mention of Africans or African Americans in plantation country here on the River Road. I live in Gonzales. My family owns a funeral home here. And when I moved back to Louisiana from Southern California, I realized that I lived once again in sugarcane plantation country.
Yeah.
I decided to go on a tour. Now, mind you, this was 1994. I went on a tour and I was so disturbed by the fact that there was no mention of Black people, no mention of African people. How can you talk about the history of plantations or the history of Louisiana and not mention our ancestors who provided the free labor that contributed to the economy and culture, not only of Louisiana, but who contributed to the economy and culture of the world by providing free labor?
Right.
So I convinced the owners of this one particular place, Tescuco Plantation, to let me use one of their buildings. And I basically taught myself about the business of operating a museum and the business of operating a nonprofit.
Wow.
I came from IBM. I worked for IBM as a systems analyst in Los Angeles. I knew nothing about nonprofits. I had over 31 hours of African and African American studies from California State University, Long Beach, but I still had no idea what is a museum. You know, you go to, what is a museum? You go, you look around at a bunch of old stuff, right? So, I had no idea until I got my master's degree from Southern University in New Orleans what museology was.
Wow.
And what the science of curation and archaeology. How do we, as Black people throughout the African diaspora and the world, fit into the history of this world? And I was determined to tell our story in Louisiana, not just from the perspective of slavery, but also from the perspective of freedom.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. And as we are going through this journey toward freedom, what would you encourage our young people, our young kids, as they're learning about Juneteenth and learning it? And a lot of them today are participating in festivities. What would you tell them about this journey to freedom and how they can learn more about this journey?
You know, one of the things that I learned early on is that knowledge is power. Education was the key to our freedom. If you did not know how to read and write, then you couldn't even read the map that would lead you away from the plantation to the next or the next place for you to find freedom. If there were messages that needed to be written to tell us who to meet and where to go, even the laws, if you think about laws that are written today, if you are not literate and educated well enough to know what you're reading, to comprehend what you're reading, then you continue to be enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge is power. Don't wait for a school to start a Black History program.
Right.
I do encourage churches to start Black History programs, but I also want to encourage youth in our community to talk to your grandparents. Black history starts at home. You may know something about Rosa Parks. You may know something about Juneteenth, June 19th, the day in Galveston, Texas, when the enslaved people found out 2 years after emancipation that freedom had come, to their region. But don't wait for Juneteenth. Don't wait for February, the shortest month out of the year. Visit a museum, start a library, and interview the elders in your own family and your own church, because you have history right in your own home and right in your own churches that relate to the civil rights movement and much, 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 so much more of our history.
Right. A lot of times we focus so much on the artifacts, but that oral history is so important. And that's the history we don't tend to see, but it's so relevant. If we can get the history from the ones who are still living, who have lived through these times, that is so important. And when we talk about this word freedom, and you think about it today, what does freedom look like today when we talk about the word freedom?
Well, you think about this. I think about freedom a lot, and have been thinking about freedom for a long time because I study enslavement. And I study the civil rights movement and Jim Crow and the Black Panther Party, and I study a lot of subjects related to freedom. But if you think about it, just in the last 3 months, think about the freedoms that you lost just during this coronavirus season.
Good.
We take freedom for granted. And as African Americans, or as Black people in America, we should be the last ones to take freedom for granted. We were told you can't go to the grocery store. You can't go to work. You can't go to school. You can't go outside. You can't hug your relatives. We couldn't even go to funerals. We couldn't go to church. Do you realize all of those things that we have been told not to do is part of what makes us free? And I think each and every one of us have missed that freedom, being able to go to the park. When's the last time that we went to the park and just sat in the park just sit in the park and just breathe fresh air. We were being told not even to go outside in some cases. So freedom for me is no burden. There is no burden in freedom. Freedom is a blessing.
Okay, so there's no burden, you say, in freedom. It's a blessing. That's a good one. I like that. And you're absolutely right. I think COVID-19 has really awakened us to the opportunities that we have, and that we probably even taken advantage of when it comes to this ideal or this word of freedom. Another question people talk about, I am I am my ancestors' wild dreams and things like that. What does that mean to you?
Well, you know, we have, what do you call them? Maybe these sayings, or sometimes we have a tendency to be a little cliche where we say, I know, and we wait until Black History Month before we say this too. I know that I'm standing on the shoulders of those who stood before me. And sometimes we don't act like that, you know? And, we wait until February and we say these cliches, and we want to read something about Dr. King or Harriet Tubman or Booker T. Washington, or there's about 8 people, we generally all know: Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X. But I want to say to you, what I've learned in doing the research all of these years about Donaldsonville and the history of Donaldsonville and the history of Louisiana is that there were people like Pierre Landry, who became America's first elected Black mayor in 1868. We should all know PBS Pinchback, who was the first governor, Black governor of any state in Louisiana. He was governor of Louisiana. Oscar Dunn. These men helped to found and create public education and create Southern University. We must go to museums, to the Black museums here in our state, and we must visit these museums that my colleagues and I have spent so many years to create, so that we can have educational programs to support your churches and our schools and our teachers and our families. So I want to say that Black history means every day I'm Black. I don't have to wait till February. I don't have to wait until June 19th. I don't have to wait until another George Floyd occurrence. Our people have been killed and abused in every way: physically, economically, verbally, emotionally. It's a wonder that we are not stark raving mad. And I know that it's been through God and through the church and through the love of God and the love of each other that we have been able to survive. And I want to say to the young people out there, you need to know that you are the descendant of survivors. So no matter how bad it may appear to be, when you turn on the TV and you see another man or woman or girl or boy who looks like you, who's been shot in the back or who's been murdered or killed, you need to understand that we are the descendants of survivors. And the more you know about our history, the more empowered you will be. And that's what I would like the message to be today. Freedom is not a burden. Freedom is a blessing, and understand that you are a survivor.
That's good. I'm really glad you said that because that brings me to our next question. Do you think bondage is sometimes more attractive than freedom?
Oh, well,
You know,
what is it that we say about sin? I had an uncle I can remember as a child the first time saying, how fun sin was. That's why it was so popular. Um, the more you sin, the more in bondage you will find yourself. I had someone asked me recently, we were having a discussion, and they said to me, why are we so scorned
Mhm.
as Black people? It seems like, you hear that, oh, we're the scorned of the earth. Why have we had so many bad things happen to us throughout history? And I want to say that we are not the scorned people. We are the people of love and forgiveness. What other people has there been on this earth who has had so many evil things done to them as a people, but yet we continue to love and forgive just beyond, I don't know. We are a loving and the scorned people are the people who hate us. So we are not the scorned people. So bondage, free yourself and your mind will follow.
Okay, I like that. I think I just want to call you up for some encouraging words sometimes. This is good. Can you kind of take us on a bit of maybe, for lack of a better word, a journey to what I would call greater freedom from today moving forward? What can we see moving forward as it relates to this ideal of freedom?
I think that the greatest thing that we could do as a people here on this earth today, and I'm speaking to our young men and our young women, is to stop killing each other. There's a message going around the world right now asking others to stop murdering us and to stop killing us. And I would just like to make an appeal to young people today that we need to come together. If we want freedom, we need for our men to protect us as women, to protect us as children, to start to police our own communities. Protect us. Don't have us wait to call on someone else when there's a disturbance going on right next door. There are mothers in distress. There are children in distress. If we want to experience true freedom in the 21st century, we must pull our communities together. We must understand the importance of voting. Know who you are voting for. Know why you are voting for them. And we must absolutely turn our attention and understand what voter suppression is so that our freedom will be determined by the people who we put in office, and they will represent us in the proper way. And so I just want to say that we fought long and hard, our ancestors and our forefathers and foremothers fought very, very hard for us to hold political office. We must take the right to vote much more seriously than we have in the past.
Absolutely.
So if we want to continue to be free, you better watch out who you're voting for or who you're not voting for.
And I just want to throw in there real quick for people who may not know Early voting actually began today, and it will end on July 4th. So you can go out and make sure you get your vote in early. It starts today and ends, well, yeah, started today and ends on July 4th. So thank you for that. So definitely moving forward, making sure we police our own communities, making sure that we are educated, and making sure we are getting to the polls, vote. Absolutely. Miles Monroe wrote a book. In the book was titled Burden of Freedom. And in this book, he talks about oppression, deliverance, responsibilities, and freedom. So, what do you think of these stages when we're talking about oppression, then deliverance, then responsibility, then freedom? What do you think about those stages that Miles Monroe talked about?
Well, boy, when you speak about oppression, um, and as an African American woman, we have a tendency to understand oppression from a different perspective because it's perpetrated on us in so many ways. Looking at oppression, for instance, in studying plantation life as it relates to women and girls and in history. The most vulnerable person on a plantation was a Black girl, because if she was raped, there was no punishment for raping a Black woman or a Black girl. If someone raped you, that perpetrator would be charged with trespassing on someone else's property. So I want to say that, particularly as Black women, we need to understand that people are watching us. The oppression that has been perpetrated on us, on our bodies, and the laws that did not protect us as we tried to protect our men and our family. We need to understand that psychologically, that has put us in a place and in a frame of mind where we think of everything as being a struggle and a burden. And I think that subconsciously, we have to pull ourselves out of a state of oppression because it has led to depression. And we must absolutely, to my young sisters out there, we must absolutely lift each other up more, get away from reality, unreality TV. We have to filter ourselves away from trash. And there is so much trash on TV and social media that causes us to do harm to each other. And I'm sorry, what was the last thing that you said in regards to the burden of freedom?
Oppression, deliverance, and responsibility, then freedom.
The deliverance and the responsibility is just what I talked about in regards to, I'm talking to Black women, but I'm talking to Black men also. We've been oppressed for so long that in many ways, I think that we are in a state of depression, especially now that we're looking at so much hate that's being perpetrated on us and not understanding why. We must find ways to deliver ourselves away from that feeling of oppression and depression. And that means turn the television off. Turn it off for 4 days. Turn it off for a week. Talk to each other through your group that you have here where we're communicating today. Talk to each other, but talk about something other than what's on CNN and CBS. Young women, young mothers, and young fathers, get off of social media. You cannot become so dependent on turning on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter that you cannot put your telephone down and talk face to face and eye to eye to your children, to your woman, to your wife, to your man, to your sister, to your brother, to your preacher, to your neighbor. Turn off social media and turn off the television. And I think that we will find a deliverance as we read the Bible and come back into the church, maybe not physically yet, but we have to come back into the church as a source of our healing community and as a source for us to know that it is the safe place for us.
Yes.
Churches need to have schools. We must have schools in our churches and not depend on others to educate us. Because if we depend on others to educate us, we will continue to be oppressed. So let's lean more on our churches to help deliver us, not just to lead us to salvation, but we need our churches to take us in, take our children in, and to educate our own community.
That's good. That's good. As you, or I can just imagine you going through your museum and looking at all of these great artifacts and things like that. What would you say the most significant thing that you have that
I can't hear you.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
You went mute.
Okay, you can hear me now?
I can't hear. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I cannot hear you.
Okay. Let's see. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Can you hear?
Pastor, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, she's not, she can't hear me. So we'll just, I guess, end that with her right there. We have our pastor on. I'm so excited. Our pastor who is founder of United Excel. Pastor, I would love for you to add to the conversation when we talk about this journey. We talk about the burden of freedom.
Well, first of all, Dr. Perry, thank you for having this panel, and to Ms. Hambrick, what profound wisdom, and when she was talking, I just wanted to give her an offering, and hopefully she can jump back on. I'm not sure if it was on her end or our end, but hopefully we can resolve that. And if not, we definitely will show our appreciation for what she represents to our community. And just her perspective, that was quite a blessing to engage that. You know, the title dealing with the burden of freedom, and I think if you look at the word burden from a legal stance, typically in the English language, I always say it's the most obscure language because there's over 700,000 words. So when you look at burden, you think of a weight in one aspect, but the legal definition of burden deals with an obligation or a duty. So when you look at the burden of freedom from a legal standpoint, the legality of it, we have a duty when it comes to our freedom. What is the duty of freedom? And so when you look at it from that perspective, your duty or your obligation, your responsibility, I've often said our ability is our responsibility. Whatever your ability is, that becomes your responsibility. And when you think about freedom, freedom in its simplest terms deals with the ability to speak, act, or think without restriction or hindrance. The right, the power to think, to act, and to speak without restriction, right?
Yes.
And so many times, if people are not held accountable, I always said God wanted a relationship with us, so he made us speaking spirits. He breathed into us, and we became a living soul. He gave us a language, a dialect. And as we command the language, we are understood and can be understood. So that in the kingdom of God, there is no such thing as free speech. God says, in every idle word men shall speak, they shall give an account of in the day of judgment. That word idle means unprofitable. So we have a responsibility with our words to uplift, not to tear down, to educate, to enlighten what we're doing tonight through language, the right and the power to speak, to think. There is no such thing as an original thought. So people must glean from the past, whether it's history, theologians, commentaries, draw in perspective, formulate thought. And we have a right and an obligation to give full expression to our thought, then to take action. As they said, all of the problems in the world exist for primarily two reasons. One, we're either thinking and not acting, or we are acting without thinking. So they must come together. And these are, again, disciplines that as leaders in the community, whether it's the faith-based community, you're in the marketplace, the synthesis of business, government, and education, we have a responsibility to think, to speak, and to act responsibly as we build a better society. And when it comes to the holidays that we celebrate concerning the emancipation, whatever it is, especially Juneteenth, it's not just celebration, right?
Right.
It is understanding how we think, right? What should we be thinking about? Again, speaking, what should we be speaking to concerning the times, concerning what we must never forget? And then what action should we take? What is the call to action now? There's always an immediate burden upon us now to act. And so I think, again, these type of engagements is what we attempt to do to engage our community so we take action.
Pastor, I want to say in regards to that message that you just delivered, when I got the idea to start an African American museum at a plantation, my family thought I had lost my mind.
I can imagine.
And I can tell you that something touched me when I was standing on the Mississippi River, watching that water roll down the river, feeling sorry for myself because I was wondering if I had made a bad decision to leave Southern California to come back to rural Louisiana. I hated this place as a child. I said I would never, and I tell young people, never say never, because you don't know what God has in store for you.
That's right.
I came back here and was so disturbed by plantation tourism that I decided to take action. And sometimes, you know, God, we don't know what God has planned for us. I never would have imagined that I would be in the business of public education.
Mm-hmm.
I am now the director of interpretation at the West Baton Rouge Museum after 23 years of being the founder of the River Road African American Museum in Donaldsonville, which received no public funding. 23 years of just holding on steadfast to faith, knowing that our children and our people needed to know about our history. There are 40 museums under the state operating budget, and there is only one African American museum, the Eddie Robinson Museum at Grambling State University, that receives funding from the state, from your tax dollars. I want to say to the members of your congregation who have been to the museum, who have supported us by bringing tours, sending donations, I want to say thank you.
Absolutely.
Because those $5, those $2 coming through the door, $10, the phone calls, the prayers is what has kept us going after 26 years. So I want to say thank you to all of the people who know me, who know my brother, who have been board members, and who have lifted us up in prayer, because you're the only reason that this museum has continued for 26 years. Thank you.
Wow. That is amazing. And, you know, count us in as a collaborative partner. And again, I think that's a call to action, Christy, on our part.
Absolutely.
What can we do to ensure that this museum gets proper funding, and from the private sector as well as the public sector? So that's a great call to action right there. Thank you for sharing that with us, for sure.
Thank you for allowing me to share.
Absolutely.
Well, it looks as if we do not have any questions. If you have questions, you all can share them, but otherwise, Pastor Ellis, you can end us with a good word. You started off with fire, so you can end us with some more fire. And just reiterate on our petition that we're doing to make sure everyone goes on. Since we've been on, we've had about 7 people to go on and sign up to be a part of our Louisiana Faith Alliance. So that's really, really good. And so we'll be closing out with that.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to the museum, because I'm not sure if did we state the hours and any marketing around the museum for those who are watching? So Ms. Hambrick, can you just again state the hours you're open, what you expect from the public, especially African-American community?
Yes. You can go to the website for the River Road African American Museum in Donaldsonville, and that is www.africanamericanmuseum.org. Real easy. Awesome. africanamericanmuseum.org. There is a place where you can see exhibits, you can see artifacts, you can keep up with our events. Of course, because of coronavirus, we are doing tours by appointment only. Correct. For individuals and families. We own 4 buildings in Donaldsonville, historic buildings. And so we have been determined to restore these buildings. Benevolent Society Hall, that was built in 1886. A Rosenwald School that was built in 1930. A teacher's home. She was a part of the great, went to Wellesley College, where the great debates took place. If you remember the movie, The Great Debaters.
Yeah.
Dr. John H. Lurie's medical office that was built in the 1930s. We had medical doctors in the rural parishes who received their medical degrees in the 1890s. Mm-hmm. So certainly if they could do, if our ancestors, the doctors, the lawyers, the politicians, the nurses, the midwives, the scientists and inventors, if they could do all that they accomplished in this state 120 years ago, there is nothing that our children cannot do. If we survived lynching, if we survived the Middle Passage, if we survived slavery, if we just survived all of the abuses that have been perpetrated against us as a people, what we have before us today is nothing compared to what your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents had to live through. Remember to be empowered by our history. Make a donation to the museum by going to www.africanamericanmuseum.org. And Pastor, please come and see us.
Will do. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. That's very important that we support what God has given you. And I do feel that, and as you were telling your story of standing on the banks of the Mississippi River, I felt God all over that. So I'm excited about this partnership. I'll just close by saying it's been said that one of the most effective ways to destroy a person is to deny or obliterate their own understanding of their history. And it's important that more and more of people in the African American experience become historians, storytellers of our history, that it's not lost, and that translation doesn't become treason, that we understand our history, not just our history of slavery, but yes, that's important, 246 years plus of slavery, but the Jim Crow era. She talked about it earlier, lynching. We can't forget the abuse by the police. There were signs up in the 60s and 50s saying, "Stop police killing." This didn't just start, but we've forgotten our history, and somehow we think we have arrived. And psychologically, I understand many times people want to forget history because we're so entrapped with trying to understand the present until it's hard to make use of the past. That's psychologically. We want to, it's easier to forget. But there's a danger in forgetting. And that is what must be taught now more than ever. Every school, all of our HBCUs can do more. Whether it's not to those students, but also to the public. We must challenge our institutions to do more. And when you look at the Louisiana Faith Alliance and the petition we put together and calling all the ministers together, it was not just a knee-jerk reaction to what we've seen with the George Floyd issue and murder that we all saw that was horrific, but the history of abuse of power. And that we must speak now power to power as citizens, stakeholders, as owners and fathers and business owners and influential leaders in our community. We must speak to power. We must say that we demand greater accountability, greater reporting, reform where reform needs to take place. And that's what the petition is all about. Showing a show of solidarity, one voice, again, having conversations and dialogues with those elected officials and those who are appointed to do their civic duty in serving our communities, having that engagement, having a seat at the table, and ensuring we achieve incredible outcomes that we all know we can achieve if we learn to work together. And so that's so important concerning what we're doing on the LA Faith Alliance. I'll just say again, when it comes to our freedom, if each one reach one, if we all decide during this time of quarantine and time of celebration, we're just going to grab one book and look back at history and find a way to be a reflection of something that our forefathers wanted us to understand and move forward, I think we can see better outcomes and a more just and humane society. Sister Christy, I will say what we're doing with United Excel, and to all who are interested in learning about social justice, the part of history I think is critical to our social justice narrative, and partnering with museums such as Dr. Hambrick is leading is important part of perhaps the story we tell moving forward. All right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. Well, that sums it up. Thank you so much, Ms. Hambrick, for joining us. And thank you, Pastor. Hey, this won't be the last time. We will be partnering you with you, Ms. Hambrick. So we will hear more and more from you. And thank you all for joining in. Remember, don't forget to text LA Change. Go ahead and sign that petition for us. Many of you have signed it already. Some of you will still sign. Text LA Change to 225-250-1970. And of course, if you want United Excel to present some more information, you have some topics that you want to talk about, hey, give us a text. Got more to 225-250-1970. And we can make sure that we cover some of those topics. And remember, get out and vote. This is the time to make sure, please get educated. on your elected officials. Make sure you know what the platforms are before you go to the polls. And if you are not registered to vote, make sure you get registered to vote, and don't forget to complete those census. And that's all we have for you all tonight. Have a good night, and thank you so much for joining us.
Amen.
Be safe and wear your mask.